Ralph Fiennes is here. He first came to our attention with his Oscar-nominated turn as a Nazi commandant in Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. Since then, he's earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's most versatile actors. Alternating between the stage and screen, he has won acclaim in such projects as Hamlet, The English Patient, and The End of the Affair. In his latest film, Sunshine, he takes on the challenge of playing three members of one Hungarian family. And here is the trailer for the film.
Deborah Carroll Unger, Molly Parker, Academy Award nominee Rosemary Harris, and Academy Award winner William Hurt.
I finally come home.
Sunshine.
I am pleased to welcome Ralph Fiennes back to this table. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Happy holidays.
You too.
Sunshine. You played three generations.
Yeah.
Tell me about the characters.
They're a Jewish, middle-class, prosperous Jewish family in Hungary at the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
First part I play is a young lawyer called Ignaz. The family name is Sonnenschein.
Yes.
Ignaz is an ambitious young lawyer, wants to be a judge, and along with his brother and his cousin, Valerie, they all agree to further their chances in getting on. They change their name from Sonnenschein to Schorsch, so they sort of compromise on their Jewishness.
Yeah.
Ignaz ends up feeling let down, embittered by his marriage breaks up. The First World War brings in briefly a communist government. So the first part, the ideals of the Habsburg, the Emperor of the Habsburg Empire, all fall apart. And Ignaz, who's completely given his life to the Austro-Habsburg ideal, the patriarchal emperor and all that era, he feels embittered and broken by it. But his main thing is he's trying to be accepted, trying to get on, trying to assimilate, lose his Jewishness to some extent. And his son Adam, is the second part I play, is a very gifted fencer, Olympic champion, national champion. Yeah. In order to join the elite fencing class, which is the officers' class, the military class, he has to convert to Catholicism, which he does actually quite easily, because he's ambitious to succeed. He does a further stage in this family's desire to be assimilated, to lose its Jewishness, to lose its identity, to do what the status quo, the society, the prevailing establishment wants. And then the Second World War comes along, and the great betrayal is that Adam, even though he's a national champion, he's won a gold medal at the Berlin Olympics. When the Hungarians ally themselves with the Nazis, he is arrested and dies in a labor camp by his own people. And then his son, who witnesses his death, Ivan, the last part, returns to a sort of broken Budapest after the Second World War, and is a sort of lost soul, really, and finds himself taking up the communist cause, the Stalinist cause, and then again he's betrayed by that, as his father was betrayed by the Hungarians and the Nazis, the fascists. He's betrayed by the Hungarian communists. He feels he's let down. So he, in the end, he resolves this whole thing of sort of trying to be accepted, being betrayed, as it were, by your own country, and then in the end he's the person who does something whereby he sort of stands alone, and he is himself. He's true to his family, true to his essential Jewishness, but also to his integral self, his really essential self, I think. So it's as much, I think, a story about politics and history, but for me it's about the integrity of the individual. That's what really, I think, the sort of cornerstone of the film is about.
The integrity of the individual.
Yeah.
In terms of making hard choices.
Yeah.
About
and
who
also,
you are.
And also there's sort of complications. There's love in it. There's sort of people betraying themselves in love affairs, or I think that their marriages break up. All in all their private affairs, sexual love affairs, these men are not happy. They're not successful. They are, in a way,
because of ambition, or because they are conflicted.
Because they're conflicted, I think, and they're both really. I mean, in Ignaz, the first character, I think his marriage breaks up. He's too ambitious. He's incredibly focused. His wife Valerie calls him on it a few times, and you see that she's alienated by his ambition. And Adam, the fencer, is has a lovely wife who he betrays, and Ivan gets caught up in a love affair that's really can't work because of the regime, because the girl he's in love with is. Everyone's paranoid by the nature of the communist regime, so they're all intermeshed in a way. But I think that the corner, in a way, the sort of the heart of the film is this character Valerie, who is played by two actresses, Jennifer Ehle,
Oh yeah, I know her well.
I married Valerie in the first.
Right.
She's and then
she was here on Broadway.
And
Tom
Stoppard
Stoppard
play. Yeah. Well, then her mother, Rosemary Harris, is a great actress.
Right.
Plays the older Valerie, and they're quite brilliant, the two of them. And the part is a wonderful part because you see in Valerie, you see a woman who is absolutely true to who she is and stands up and she has a moral, a true moral sense. I think she's the key part in a way.
What brought you to the project?
István Szabó, the director, I've always loved his films, Mephisto and Colonel Gradle particularly.
Right.
And then having met him, he showed me his earlier films. I think he's the most brilliant human being and a wonderful director. And I read the script blew me away when I read it. It was very long, one of the longest scripts I've ever read. But I felt deeply moved by it. And obviously the challenge of playing three parts. And then also what the parts were and the fact that they were related. And when he talked to me in depth about the parts, about the film, about what the parts, who they were, because he talked very clearly about the sort of inner nature of all three of them, incredible detail. So I felt more informed about a character than I've ever felt before, because the writer, the man who's created these, was actually saying, and this is what I want. This close-up is about such and such. So there's not a frame in the film which he hasn't nurtured and been very, very precise about.
Was it challenging for you to do three characters? I mean, the concentration, the sense of getting into the character, or is it
Well, István was very structured about incredibly structured about and precise about the nature of each scene and what he wanted from the character in each scene. There were days when I had to play three at once.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah. I mean, why would he do that to you? I mean, why wouldn't he play one?
He tried not to. It was just often locations and scheduling. It was just like if you have one location for one day, and often deliberately, you meet all three characters over time in one place. But basically, I shot Ignaz first, and then Adam, then Ivan. But it was. I found Ivan the hardest because it was the communist period, and I had nothing in my own life that I could relate to or make an imaginative connection with, where I could think, oh yeah, this would be a bit like such and such. You know, the whole paranoia and suspicion and lack of the lack of trust, and just it's a kind of madness. I think what went on, the way people were controlled, and I found that really hard to. And I could imagine it, but. I found, like for instance, in the scene where I interrogate William Hurt, István said, William, gesture, look around the room. Yeah. And I said, yeah, is that because it's being recorded? Said, yeah, he said, well, I said, will people get that now? Because that's like a shorthand, if we were in the comedy say and I went like that. Yeah. You'd know I'm saying watch out. Right. But I think now we've come so far away from even having it across our Iron Curtain. So all the time I was very aware how the communist period is now history, and how when we had the Iron Curtain and the Cold War was going on, our films and our books were full of points of references, and that's all gone now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it was just hard to really grasp in my head the reality of what that must have been like. I just found that difficult. I mean, I could rationally understand it, but to imagine that so many people were squeezed into being suspicious, treacherous towards each other, manipulative, doubting, constantly betraying each other, that Ivan couldn't stand up for Andor Knorr, that he was, Ivan, this is William Hurt, who plays Andor Knorr, is like a father figure to Ivan, the last character. Brings him into the police force. And in the end, Ivan is asked to interrogate William Hurt, Andor Knorr, and in the end, it leads to his death.
All right, take a look at this. This is these two characters are in this film. Roll tape. This segment.
She told me she had a husband and 2 children. Her husband's in the foreign ministry.
Her husband blew up Gestapo headquarters in Paris. He's one of the heroes of the French resistance. You don't want to make an enemy of him. Her husband belongs to the Comrade General's circle.
Does any molecule in you want to be a Hollywood star, actor?
What do you mean by a Hollywood star?
Someone who does big budget films that are geared to sort of commercial appeal. Geared to commercial appeal, driven by commercial appeal. This film seems to me to be a film that's driven by quality, and the appeal will be determined by a consideration of factors. But it is not sort of the driving force behind the movie. It is something else. There are certain other films that come down that you know, and I don't mean, you know, Grinch, you know, but you know, come out of Hollywood, destined to find, created to find a huge audience. I don't think this was created to find a huge audience. It was created to find an audience, but it's the loving work of people of great passion for this story, place, themes, etc. And I just wonder whether any part of you cares about that, or do you care about it, but somehow your own internal integrity forces you to choose those things that interest you the most?
Well, I've been offered what I think we'd agree were overtly commercial, what you call Hollywood films.
Yeah, I would sure you would.
And I've done a couple, and they haven't done that well at all. And I think that's
what are we talking about?
Well, I think the Avengers that I did,
of course, right.
Which really didn't do well. It tanked really, big time. And that was I thought, no, this would be great. It's light-hearted. It's just a piece of fantasy that has been very popular on television, and I loved making it. Had a great time doing it, but it didn't work at all. And I think that's not my confidence as someone who can say, yeah, I'll do, you know, a big Hollywood film. Also, I actually don't know that I'm the right, you know, there are actors who really work well in that format, and I don't know that I'm good at that, or I just don't know that I have that, to have what it takes to make those, to be right in those kind of films.
I mean, you can take an example, for example, I mean, what do I know, but you take a guy like Bruce Willis, who's a good actor, but is good in those kind of films.
Yeah, well, I think it's just his track record shows that people like Bruce Willis, they want to see him in. They'll go and, you know, I'll go and see Bruce Willis in an action.
Yeah, exactly. But he can do the other thing too. I mean, obviously he's an actor. He's a good actor. But they do want, you know, you don't know that yet as to whether that's. I mean, I think you've had too limited a sample to figure out that audiences want you, and maybe a good role. I mean, and sometimes it can be turned by a role.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, you could appear in one of these sort of Jack Ryan characters that Harrison Ford, you know, had no longer. Ben Affleck has them now. I mean, you know that those could. Because it's driven by story as well. Yeah. And at some point, story and actor and part merge.
No, I'm not deliberately, if you're saying, are you deliberately avoiding those, I'm not, I go with my gut instinct about directors, and I've recently turned down, you know, a film with overtly commercial film with a great director who I really like to work with. It just was the choice between that and another thing which appealed to me a bit more.
What was that?
I can't tell you now. I can't tell you. I'll tell you in a year's time if you have me back.
And, okay. Are you going to do something with Oliver Stone?
I am, yeah.
That's Borders what?
Beyond Borders.
Beyond Borders. What's that?
Well, it's inspired by relief workers, people working out, you know, in Cambodia, Ethiopia.
Or the Balkans.
Or the Balkans, Kosovo, anywhere, any of these places of international crises where, you know, populations are being hammered by corrupt governments or whatever, or natural disasters, and it's really the story of two people against that background, and, you know, he addresses a lot of sort of moral issues about the nature of relief work in it very strongly, very powerfully, I think. Sunshine
is currently in theaters. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Good to see you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Jennifer Lash was a highly regarded British novelist. She published her first novel, The Burial, after she finished college in 1961. She went on to write 8 critically acclaimed books before her death from cancer in 1993. She was also the mother of 7, including 2 of the most respected actors today, Rafe and Joseph Fiennes.
They cast a spell on you, you know, the Jews. When you work closely with them, like I do, you see this. They have this power. It's like a virus. Some of my men are infected with this virus.
You've broken your ankle, and I'm going to have to try and bind it. I think you've also broken your wrist, and maybe some ribs, which is why it's hurting you to breathe. I'm going to have to walk to El Taj.
Oh, Dave, The rooster tells us so.
It was the owl, believe me, love. It was the owl.
You would leave us players without a scene to read today?
Blood Ties, Jennifer Lash's 8th and final book, was just released in paperback. I am pleased to have here at this table to talk about their mother and her career, Ralph Fiennes, Joseph Fiennes, and their sister Sophie Fiennes, an accomplished film and stage producer. Welcome all.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have, I don't know when we've done this, had 3 members of the same family here to talk about something. Just tell me about your mom. We know that some say this is her best book, Blood Ties. Yours, On Pilgrimage, another book. Tell me what she meant to you, what you think her career meant, and why you want to make sure that there is a sense of
her life, her adult life. I mean, she married my father, I think, when she was 21, 22. Seemed to be divided, the pressures of bringing up a family. She had 6 children of her own, and she adopted another son, Mick, and her need to write. She had published 2 novels before she married, having had quite an unhappy and unloving, maybe, unhappy childhood, certainly. Met my father, found great happiness with him, but put writing to one side until maybe 15 years after she married. She finally was able to start to write again, but it was always a struggle because money was often difficult for my parents. And she was diagnosed as having cancer in 1987. And when they had operated, and she went into a remission for a time, she went on a pilgrimage to France. She'd wanted, I think she felt that the cancer, having been diagnosed as having cancer, an indication of the value of the life she had, or the life she had left. So this decision to go on pilgrimage, and she dedicated the book to Marjorie Kemp, who's a medieval pilgrim, a woman, and I think she felt the experience of the woman on pilgrimage and the questions about faith were very important to her. Subsequent to that, she started to write Blood Ties, which I know was a novel she had in her head for some time, about family, familial relationships, parent-children relationships, when they're terrible, when they're dysfunctional, and when they can finally, through love, be resolved, and there is a possibility of renewal and healing.
Sophie?
Sorry, what was your question?
Well, it's just your mother. I mean, tell me how you remember, because I should say this. You 3 are here because of a reading. Mm-hmm. And the point is here to do what, in a sense? Joe, and then I'll come back to
celebrate her work. I wish that
to bring attention to her work and celebrate her work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wonderful that they're now in print. I wish she was here to interact with you and to speak with people. Herself, so we're just an extension of voice, and I guess we're actively involved in the role that an author would participate in pushing their work to a wider consciousness. So that's really our role.
Yeah, it's in a sense, she's not here, so you know what better?
We're promoting her
better
work.
thing that sorry, you're promoting her work.
Yes, it's very simple.
Mom, you're not here, so we're here for you. In what better way? So that a larger world can know what she was proud of.
Yeah.
Tell me about this book, okay? Tell me about Blood Ties.
Well, Blood Ties is a book which really elucidates her interest in people and psychology, and it's a very human book. People find it quite harrowing at a certain level. It is, but it's also very much about the redemptive power of love and the healing qualities of nature, as opposed to the more twisted machinations of the darker aspects of humanity. The character Violet Farr, the central character in the book, is really a woman who is she's profoundly so I can't find the word. She's a woman who has not really found herself. She's not really found a way in her life to release the sense of her potential. So the child that she has, Lumsden, the central character in the book, is really a sort of like a twisted mirror of what she intended for herself as a child. He doesn't project the sense of herself that she would have wished. And so this starts this sort of domino effect of lack of love and respect, and it's really about parenting. And I'm sorry, I'm being very inarticulate.
No, that's okay. I get it. I understand.
I'm just trying to encapsulate it, but I find it hard to encapsulate it because it's such a complex book, really, because it's about human psychology, so it's hard to kind of just...
You've mentioned your dad a couple of times. Now, tell me about him before we discuss more about the family. I mean, what's his profession?
His name is Mark Fiennes, and he's a photographer. And he had spent a lot of his after leaving school, he went abroad to Australia and to the States, in fact, and worked on ranches in sheep stations in Australia and cattle ranches in Texas, and then came back and was farming in East Anglia, which is the easterly part of England. Right. As a bachelor farmer, considered very eligible. met my mother. I think a friend gave them a supper, and he promptly fell asleep. And the friend left them together, and he was just snoring on the sofa.
He fell asleep and she fell in love.
Yeah. He fell asleep and she fell in love. Yeah. Now, what influence have all of you had on each other? I mean, did he influence your decision to become an actor?
Not indirectly. I think both... maybe acting is... that there is a need for, somewhere down the line, I don't want to go into it because that's not what it's about, but there is a need for parental approval. I guess somewhere there is something about the parental approval factor. Yeah. And so that's married in with my decision, but it was not indirect. I think it was something more to do with having a bounty of stimulus and never kind of pushed or shoved, but encouraged to pursue our imagination and our passions. And that led to various members of the family going into the umbrella of the arts, I guess.
And you, Sophie, became a producer.
Showbiz.
What? Showbiz. you chose to work...
I have to say that actually my response to that kind of... Because I used to feel that her fascination with us as children was almost like a project, and I felt quite uncomfortable being under the scrutiny of her sort of analysis, which was, as you can tell from her writing, is so acute.
So terrifyingly intuitive.
Yeah, you felt she could read your
mind.
Give
me an example of a terrifyingly intuitive.
Mother.
Oh, very personal.
Oh, come on.
She would kind of know, she would sort of know if you had been to a party and had been kissing a girl, or she would know, she would just sort of guess what was going on in your life. She'd guess your moods too, you know. I mean, I could pick up the phone and say, "Hello, Mummy." She'd say, "Darling, what's wrong? What's the matter?" And she would know immediately.
She could hear in the tone of your voice, the timbre of your voice.
Yeah, and she would somehow just pick up on what your anxiety was, or what your worry was, or what you were uptight about very quickly.
And how is she different from your dad?
My father's a rock, really. He's an incredibly loyal, generous, understanding and practical man. And his practicality, and which I think was a backbone to holding the immediate day-to-day, together, both of them, but she was quite volatile emotionally, and he is much more steady in that way.
Did you all gather for dinner at the same table when you were growing up?
Yeah, it was very much like the Waldens.
Yeah. No, come on, what was it like? You know, but she sounds like she's the stimulus.
That she's the stimulus?
Yes, for the conversation.
No, absolutely. I think that both... Mark, my father, was this kind of biblical figure. This kind of, like you said. Is. Still is, sorry.
Wait till he sees this tape. Your son, Joseph, thinks you're dead.
Yeah, you'll be in the past then.
You'll be dead. Now, here's what I want you to do. Just read something briefly. Can you do that for me? You have your hands on...
I just had something that I wanted to read, which was a part of On Pilgrimage, which is interesting because...
Yeah, you're going to have to read something, so think about this.
Okay.
Right. Where she's seeking and she doesn't know really what she's trying to find. She's trying to find her faith, but really she's trying to find some aspect of herself to retrieve with some kind of intensity. And the practical reality of the pilgrimage helps that, in a sense. And she gets to this place called Rocamadour, which is in France. And there's just this very short paragraph where she says, in this incredible landscape, very ancient, in fact, an area where the Cathars used to inhabit, full of lots of, history and No, she said it's called Rocamadour, and she says, Rocamadour remains for me, above all else, this spirit of place, something complete and tangible by the sheer force of its intangibility. Within that simple listening experience, there seemed to be all I sought and all I would ever find, a continuous, live cantata of silence, the hinge and sum and fulcrum of the rest.
On pilgrimage. Ray? Joe?
There's a passage, I think it speaks for itself again. It's in Le Puy, which is in France, and I'll just read. It's a short passage. While we were standing together at the back of the basilica, there was suddenly a tremendous gust of wings. Sparrows and pigeons were continually flying around, but this gust of bird was mighty and different. We looked up, and there, high above the narthex, was the unmistakable, compelling face of a barn owl. Again and again it flew and paused, frantically crashing its white body with terrible hopelessness against the dusty windows. Every so often it would fly the whole length of the church, only to soar up again into another barrier of light. I cannot describe how unbearable it was to follow the flight of that bird, knowing that we were quite incapable to give it its freedom. There were holes and spaces, if only it could see them. Each time it failed and paused, and the stillness became longer, and the fearful despair of that bird felt greater. We left for the library. We couldn't bear to be there. Later, the whole experience haunted me. The gaze of that particular bird was so involving. I suddenly thought, what if God witnesses in every man a divine spark, which flies within us blindly, like that bird, crashing in terror, punched and pounded from wall to wall, blinded by obstacles and dust, and yet God knows that there is a way for natural freedom and ascending flight. What an extraordinary pain that witness would be.
I want you to read something, please, okay?
No.
Yes, now. Choose something. While he finds it, what is interesting, and as you were reading this, it is the fact that if your parents, they leave you so many memories that are just based on personal remembrances and memories of a walk, memories of a conversation, memories of a moment when you desperately needed somebody, to be a rock for you, to be an inspiration for you. But if your parents had the good fortune to be involved in some creative expression beyond the relationship, they leave you something in addition, which is words, which you will, all of you will leave, performances and some sense of, and that's really a remarkable thing that a parent can leave. I remember the opportunity to live again through.
Ginny once told me my best friends would be words, and one should just hold hands with words because they'll never let you down, and that was something which always remained with me. So it's wonderful that to have and to look back. Also, she has an extraordinary amount of paintings. I think she felt that she was predominantly a painter before a writer. But due to the funds, I think Sophie was explaining earlier, due to the funds that the oil paint and canvas is so expensive, so she was forced to express herself through writing. But it's an incredible privilege and joy to have these books, like a diary of her life.
I think also for us there's definitely a sense that she was so generous with herself as a parent, and that it's exciting to be able to kind of create an audience for her work. Which we feel was sort of neglected due to the priority of motherhood that she put really before being a writer.
Yeah, to take 13 years away from something, clearly, if you wrote that young.
You had a voice.
You had voice, A, she'd found a voice, and B, this had to be at the core of her being, to be a writer and to be successful and to have found a voice and an audience.
I think she was full of ideas and full of a voice or passion or opinions when she was very, very young, and I think she had quite a stultifying upbringing. Her parents were in the British Indian Army, and when India had independence they came back to England, and they lived in a semi-suburban part of southern England called Surrey, south of London. And the atmosphere she told us about was this repressive atmosphere of probably the worst kind of sort of English buttoned-upness and people not expressing themselves. Certainly her parents didn't demonstrate affection or love to any of their children. I think there was a lot of banter. Her brothers are very gifted intellectuals, academics, and have great minds, but I think she was always made to feel a little inferior and inadequate. And I think she was bursting with these feelings. And I think ultimately it got too much. And she would tell the story of the day when it all went wrong, when she suddenly lost it and screamed, and then they called a priest, and the priest eventually took her away. And she left home at 16, and she went to stay with a series of people, series of short-term jobs, short-term courses at art college, or even a short acting course at one point, until she ended up meeting a woman called Iris Birtwistle in East Anglia, in the east part of England, who encouraged her to write. But my sense is that she had it in her from very early on. She was full of an urgent need to challenge ideas, people, and a questing spirit.
We close. The three of you are reading. Is it this evening?
Yeah.
In New York. Where?
At the New School.
At the New School. All in an effort to remind you that their mother was a writer that they were very proud of, and Blood Ties is now in paperback. We conclude with reading from that.
Well, I'd like to read an extract towards the end of the book. It describes the young boy Spencer, who has been very detached, but has met an Irish couple who have slowly started to give him some confidence in himself, and he has become very close to the hens in this couple's farmyard. And some village boys one day attack the hens and kill them. And Liam is one of the village boys, and Spencer is the young man who the story is now focusing on. And then Liam let go on the crest of a swing, and this warm, soft weight of feathers and the claws hurtled through the air and landed with a thud at Spencer's feet. The bright eye was still open. There was blood coming from the beak. The boys ran off. They ran past Spencer, laughing and spitting pips and apple cores out of their mouths in his direction. Then Spencer heard them take up the bikes. He heard their voices fade. He bent down and gathered the poor bird up into his arms. It was for him she had died. She had died for him. It was him, not the bird, that Liam despised. Spencer stroked the soft, warm feathers. He could not believe it. He had seen death many times, rabbits, kittens, newborn lambs, a poisoned fox once up on Myrna. He had always known, as Donal said, that death was just a part of things. But this death was different. He had never known a death like this, taken jeeringly, tauntingly, as a sport of derision. He felt shamed. They had gone now, and he had done nothing. He walked slowly back through the orchard grass and down the muddy bank, his shoes slipping and sliding on the greasy ground. He went over to the large stone trough by the red barn. He sat on the edge of it. He let the bird's head dip into the cold water. He wiped the blood from the sharp beak. He closed the bright eye. He had not known until this moment that he loved the hens. But as he held the bird, as he felt into the soft, fine warmth under her wing, he knew he loved her. Love was not a word that belonged to him. Any love he had heard mentioned was remote, like the love of God or the love in ballad songs. But now, in the bitter, damp, shadowy dark of the laundry yard, he felt he understood it a little.
This book, Sophie said once that it was only after death that you understood the journey of her life. The journey of her life was about these books, but it was also about the three of you and your brothers and sisters who I don't know. But thank you for coming and reminding us of your mother and her work and her life, of which you all are. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.